Welcome to the Sanity podcast by the New York Sun. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and every week, along with my co-host, Rebecca Sugar, we talk to the people that you want to hear from.
We're joined today by Mark Penn, Chairman and CEO of Stagwell Incorporated, a NASDAQ-listed global digital-first marketing solutions company. Mark has had a distinguished career as many things: a pollster, an author, a political strategist. Some of his former clients have included both Clintons, former Prime Minister, the late Menachem Begin of Israel, Tony Blair, and just to confuse us all, Donald J. Trump. He worked on his 2020 presidential campaign as well.
No. I did not work on his presidential campaign.
Oh, so, I'm sorry. Excuse me. What did you work on with him? I know he's on the list.
I never worked. The only thing we ever did was like 20 years earlier. We did a poll for him, but no work on his.
Oh, forgive me. Okay, well, maybe I was just projecting. But maybe it's also Wikipedia's fault, which I never use as a source for anything, but there were so many fun things on there about you. So that one wasn't really true, and you should check your page. But there was something else on there I wanted to bring up, and maybe you'll tell us if it's true or not. Apparently you did your first poll at the age of 13 at the Horace Mann School here in New York, where you concluded that the faculty were more liberal than the country generally. Is that true?
I'm shocked.
That is 100% true. I saw a program on CBS about race relations and said, that's interesting. And then I polled the faculty and I compared the results to the national results. And I have it somewhere. It's faded a little bit now since it's, I guess, 50 years old, but
still very relevant, I'm sure.
It was my first taste of polling and what it could do.
Okay, so that's 1 and 1 for Wikipedia. Let's go for one more quickly before we jump into the interview. Wikipedia also noted that your brother has claimed that you were initially rejected from Harvard University, but you personally went and commissioned and petitioned the dean and got yourself in. Is that true?
Well, that's somewhat close. I was waitlisted, and I asked for an interview with the dean of admissions. And at the end of the interview, he said, "We should have accepted you ahead of a lot of other people," and accepted me 2 days later.
Okay. All right. Public advisory. Everyone go check your Wikipedia page. They're not doing too well. Okay. Let's get to what we're here for, not a Wikipedia review. We wanted to start, I think, we're here in New York. We wanted to start with the Madamani race for mayor, what you're seeing there. And I'm particularly interested in the messaging being deployed by those who are opposed to his becoming the next mayor. I'm concerned that calling Zoran Madamani what I think he is, a socialist and anti-Semitic, may not be the most effective ways to defeat him. From a marketing perspective, would you advise that we try to defeat him in that way? And what are you seeing in the polls in terms of the race more generally?
Well, look, I see in the polls that Madamani probably has something of a lead. I think Cuomo is second. I think actually the Republican is going to be very close because people don't realize that New York City is not like Georgetown, which is 95-5, but closer to 65-35. And so there are a fair number of Republicans throughout New York City, and then Adams, fourth. And we're actually working, or at least one of the companies at Stagwell is working on releasing a poll that will come out in the next day or so that really shows that. And I think in general that Madamani skated through and the implications of a socialist anti-Semite and what that would mean for mayor were not really made as the critical elements of people voting. So let me explain to you, or maybe go back to one of my most successful ads was the 3 a.m. ad, right, about Hillary Clinton. Now, it came too late. We won the primaries. We'd lost the caucuses, which wouldn't be affected by the ads. But it took something everybody knew, and suddenly it made it salient. Oh, yeah, the president of the United States makes commander-in-chief decisions. They all knew it, but they didn't think about it, right? And so we really have to go to, well, what does it mean to have the biggest Jewish community outside of Israel to be governed by somebody who won't even recognize Israel, or will not disavow, globalize the Intifada. What does that really mean for people? And same thing, what does it really mean to have a socialist? Young people in particular have no knowledge of Venezuela, Cuba, the Soviet Union, any of the failed experiments and what they turned into. So we have to give those issues what we call salience and meaning to people. And fourthly, what does it mean to be in the city, for example, where 9/11 occurred, where the financial crisis occurred, where Sandy Hook occurred, and to have somebody who has no experience handling those kinds of emergencies that occur when you're in what has always been called the second toughest job in America. And so none of that got salience. And, a lot of this, and a lot of this also is a function of the changes in the electoral system. My first race was for Ed Koch in the 1977 mayoralty. And that race occurred in September. And then the top two candidates have a runoff. Now, what they've done to the electoral system here is they've moved these primaries to June, in the dead of summer. They have provided this incredibly complex system that it does fake runoffs. Okay, a runoff is what we'll have now, where the top two contenders go against each other and actually flesh out their differences. When there's a playing field with 5 or 6 candidates, that one-on-one clash doesn't happen. And the voters don't really get the full story. And you notice that they have not put that system into effect for the general election. They just did it for the primaries because they wanted to basically be able to take over the primaries, with activists, which is what they've done.
Let me ask you, Mark, as a sort of for an opposing scouting report. I mean, there's been a lot of talk that Madamani succeeded because of his ads, because of his messaging, everything from the vertical kind of social media ads to the famous halal card ad to repeatable slogans and clear messaging. I mean, as a professional, how do you evaluate his operation?
Well, professional, obviously super successful. He turned out a vote. You could see overall young people flocked to his candidacy, and young people actually kind of voted in unprecedented numbers. He clearly ran a successful modern campaign that energized parts of a Democratic primary electorate, and the rest of the electorate was not as energized, didn't understand the implications. Part of what happens with surprise upsets is that they kind of come at you at the end, and that's kind of what you see here. But yes, obviously a very successful campaign. Obviously motivated a lot of people who normally didn't vote to go out and vote, and obviously caught on. And so the opposite campaign. The other problem you have often with what you call challenger candidates is their flaws and problems don't typically come out in the first part of their race, right? It's the structure of when you have incumbents versus challengers. Challengers have nothing to lose, everything to gain. And if they catch on, they kind of hockey stick at the end. So yes, you got to give it an A.
Right. I guess I wanted to ask you about that a little more deeply. I saw everything that Ari mentioned. We all did. And yes, it was a successful by definition campaign. I didn't find it particularly brilliant. It just felt like the other side was not in the campaign. And so it left a lot open. But to make TikTok videos of yourself walking up and down the length of Manhattan is cute. But I think every 30-year-old is doing something like that. It's not original. It's not, to me, a sign of some particular political brilliance on the part of Zoran Madamani and his team. It just sort of more pointed to the lack of brilliance on the other side. So do you think a well-advised campaign on the other side, whoever that may be, can overcome what people are calling the Madamani effect here?
I mean, are you essentially saying like what happened with Cuomo? Or was he
I'm saying Cuomo let him post those TikTok videos and take this election, but I don't think the posting of those TikTok videos was such a stroke of genius. Or maybe I'm wrong. You tell me.
Well, but look, there are certain campaigns, like when I was with Hillary against Obama in Iowa, right? And this to me was the closest, where the incumbent gets unseated by kind of a new face coming into politics, fueled with social media. We don't know what the Democratic Socialists did. We don't know the legality of that, to be honest. And we don't know the real size of what his campaign. There's a lot we don't know about all of that, right? And so in terms of the organizational effort to actually get out that number of votes, despite really, not disavowing even something as basic as globalizing the Intifada, is an achievement, and it is achievement of using modern communications tools, and it is very much that similar notion. Now people now will look at Madami. They didn't really look at him because he wasn't seen as a serious contender, and they'll examine things in a way that they were frankly unwilling to examine them. Oftentimes when you're an incumbent against that kind of challenger, no matter what you do really works, until people say, well, wait a moment, this guy really could be mayor? You mean New York could be governed by an anti-Semitic socialist? Well, I didn't think that was possible. Well, now that that's possible, and you think through the implications of that is a very different ballgame.
You think there are enough of those people to overcome either Adams or Cuomo?
Or another way of saying that is let's say people have that realization now, Mark. I mean, the way the race is set up, as you laid it out, I mean, is it even possible without some dramatic change? I mean, in terms of someone stepping away, I mean, it just feels like the numbers are kind of difficult at this point with Cuomo, Adams, Sliwa, and then Mamdani.
Well, look, maybe one or more of those candidates will decide it's not worth running, or maybe, it will naturally become a two-person race anyway. And the closer you get to the end, after all, do the Republican voters think that Curtis is going to win? No. Are they willing to vote for Cuomo or Adams in order to not be governed by a Democratic socialist? Obviously, that's a decision that they're gonna grapple with. What will the leadership out in Washington and the Republican Party have to say to those Republican voters? Remember, there's 8 million New Yorkers. There's 4.5 million registered voters. Madami has a base of a little over 400,000 to 500,000 people, who voted for him one time, with a lot of misinformation about him, right, or lack of full information about him. So the chance to overwhelm that in a general election held on a general election date without ranked choice voting is actually quite high, and particularly when you look at the polls coming out where he's considerably below a majority.
Okay, I hear optimism. I'm going to take that as optimism.
Well, it's almost like a prisoner's dilemma, right? So Adams says, I'm the incumbent, I'm not going to step aside, right? Cuomo says, well, I'm polling above Adams, I'm not going to step aside, even though he lost in the primary. And and Curtis says, well, this is a Democratic problem. Why should I step aside? I'm the nominee. So I'm just curious about the sort of psychology of this, where the ego's involved.
Right. Right. Egos in politics. Who knew? Who thought it could be?
Ultimately, the voters will decide who the two people are. Adams has a very high unfavorable. Cuomo didn't win, but he has a very low unfavorable. So, and Curtis has a limited constituency. So I think one way or another, if Cuomo comes out of the box swinging and with energy, I really think that you'll see the race telescope.
Let me just say one more question on this. And what do you make of Cuomo? I mean, did he just not find his groove? Has he lost his fastball? I mean, what happened here? He raised a lot of money. He came out, with 100% name recognition. Mamdani was at 0%. I mean, this has to be one of the biggest screw ups you've ever seen.
Yeah, it was almost as bad as Mike Bloomberg, but not quite.
There is this incumbent insurgent phenomenon in the Democratic primary process, particularly when the process has changed. And what would really have had to happen is that Cuomo and his campaign and IE and ever would all have had to go after Madamani very early in the process before he looked like anything. And so you have these phenomenons where incumbents get knocked off, in Democratic primaries through the social media. And the question is, if you have a runoff and you have a point of reflection, remember, AOC won her race with a total of 15,000 votes in a district of 715,000 people, right? The primary system itself, even as I look through across America, Democrats go out and say, I want every vote. I want everybody voting. No, they don't. Not in primaries. They want nobody voting in primaries except activists. And unfortunately, a 25 or 30% turnout in a primary is considered a big turnout. So I think we've got to go back to the what we had. I think in 1977, I had more people voting than voted, in New York now. Primary in September, run off across the top two if nobody gets 45%. And that's a real election system, in a town that's dominated by one party.
What do you think Democrats are going to do generally with the Mamdani problem that they have? Either they're pro-socialist or they aren't. And specifically in New York with the Jewish community, I think people like Chuck Schumer, of course, and even more nationally, Hakeem Jeffries have long been courted by the Jewish community for their pro-Israel positions. Will New York Jews, American Jews, start to rethink whether they have real influence or just access to these politicians? How are people what are the effects of Mamdani's victory here on Democrats more generally?
Well, there's no effect unless he wins, right? I mean, so I think it's a little early to judge that. So if he wins, I think it could have effect. And I think the Democratic Party has got to reckon with, are Democratic Socialists Democrats? And are they going to let their party be governed by a minority within the party or throw them out? Because ultimately, if the Democratic Socialists take over the Democratic Party, I don't think that they're anywhere close to winning the national election.
I think the Schumer question is really interesting. I mean, he's been kind of holding his fire in a way that, like, let's say Nadler hasn't. Some reporting is like Nadler's all in on Mamdani.
Yeah, I think he is risking the support of a lot of his former supporters in the Jewish community, and I wonder how seriously he takes that threat.
Or the threat of AOC in the primary.
I mean, Schumer's a long way down that road once he started to criticize Israel and Netanyahu, and he has shown so far that he will do anything necessary to keep his position over what I think he believed for 60 years. So it'll be interesting to see how he comes out and whether he draws a line. I mean, look, if I were talking to Schumer, not as a political consultant, as a person, I'd say very simply, if Madamani isn't willing to disavow phrases like that and to try to reinterpret phrases that clearly mean, the death of Jews, you got to say you cannot support him until he does that.
Part of Mamdani's victory in this primary is, of course, that he talked about economics, basic economics, and one of the criticisms of both parties nationally is that they haven't addressed kitchen table issues for the average American, and Elon Musk is now animated by spending and the economy, and he's going to start his own party, we think. Do you think he's going to start his own party?
It started. It's registered, the America
It's
Party.
registered. Do you think it's real? Do you think it has any momentum? What do you think his real intentions are in registering this party?
I couldn't tell you what his real intentions are. I'd have to know what his real intentions are. I think that he kind of pissed off the left, and then he pissed off the right. And I know in my polls he had a very positive image going into last year, and he came even a positive image, very positive image coming out after the election. Then the Democrats went after him on Doge, and they lowered his image, and now he's kind of turned back on the Republican base, and that's really kind of I think torpedoed his image. And so he's going to be running, like -16, and he was +10. So I don't know what he's doing at this point. I don't know that that this is as ideal a time for a third party. Although I do think that the basic idea of starting a party with congressional districts, winning some critical congressional districts, is actually the way that Lincoln and the Republican Party started. And it is actually the right way, I think, to start such a movement instead of trying to win the presidency, which other people have. And of course, Musk cannot win the presidency because he's not a natural born citizen.
If he asked you to work on the party with him, would you say yes?
I'm never going to answer that question. That's a hypothetical. I like and admire Musk. I interviewed him. I think people were unfairly targeting X. I don't know what his real intentions are, and I don't know where he's going to wind up because he has ping-ponged around here a considerable amount.
It almost seems like also that for the party to be successful, it would have to distance itself at least a little bit from him, right? Given those numbers, or at least find a constituency that's beyond just like an Elon Musk vanity project.
Well, but is he for? I just don't know where on the spectrum he's coming out because he reaffirmed Second Amendment rights. Is he trying to split the Republican Party into two? I think the Republican Party now is as cohesive as it's been in the last decade. I think it's the Democratic Party now that has the fissures in it. And if somebody came along and created a moderate Democratic Party and took the moderate Democratic voters out from the extreme left, that is a really interesting mission that I think nobody is going to take on. But maybe kind of what we did in the 90s with President Clinton. And we discovered there's a lot of voters in the middle that you could really bring into a party. But so I'm a little unclear about what he's trying to do structurally in terms of what's possible. I think part of what he's trying to do is, wow, if the Democrats and Republicans aren't going to work together, maybe if you picked up 5 congressional seats somewhere, regardless of the spectrum, you'd be determining who the next speaker is. And he might be right about that.
Yeah, or some of these close Senate races.
And the funny thing about that is a wedge like that might actually force the Democrats and Republicans to work together.
Yeah. That would be funny.
Or you'd have a splinter group. You'd have incredible realignments if someone really held, of any persuasion, really held the balance of power in a separate, well-funded party. So I don't know where he's going. There are a lot of possibilities. I do think that starting in the grassroots with congressional seats is actually the way to go.
It also, I'm just not sure, and you would know this much better than we do, Mark, is like, is there a huge constituency for like cost cutting? Like, is that really, or that government should spend less? I found that like kind of a strange focus for Musk, honestly. Like if your dream is to build a rocket to go to Mars or any of these other projects, like how does that jive with the sort of, smaller government costs? I mean, is that a banner that you think people will rally to, this size of government debt question?
I can only tell you that the balanced budget idea, which we drove in the Clinton administration successfully, is the single most popular, most powerful policy proposal of, like, I could test hundreds, right? And still today, 80% favor a balanced budget and getting the country back. Now, the problem, when I ask them, you want it by raising taxes or cutting spending, they say cutting spending. Then the problem is when you get to the specific cuts, then people are, well, of course, I didn't want to cut that. So somehow we found a formula between Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich that actually got the country in record time to a balanced budget. But that requires bipartisan support, because the problem you have now in the country is that I think Trump could give out Christmas presents on Fifth Avenue and Democrats would say it has razor blades in them. Okay. that right now no party will concede anything, even something as basic as the strike on Iran nuclear facilities, to the other party, things that should be 80-20. And until we get back to a politics where people will at least acknowledge when one side or the other is somewhat successful at something, it just serves to, keep this country as divided as possible.
There have been polls that have come out indicating a sharp drop in Democratic support for Israel, particularly among younger people. What do you make of that? Is that a trend going
and among
forward?
Republicans too,
and among us, but the Democratic numbers were even more stark. And I wonder just if you think that that's reversible. Is that a continuing trend going forward? What's being done to address it? What would Mark Penn do, or what are you doing to address it?
Well, first, we have the most consistent data, and a lot of it is how you ask the questions and what you put the frame on. I always ask the basic question since October 7th, and are you more with Israel or are you more with Hamas? And it's basically, it was 80-20, now it's 77-23. These changes that you're talking about are small changes, but they are like 40 to 50% of people 18 to 24 or 18 to 29. So there's a significant number of young people who, when I then probe, and this is very related to the whole Madamani, when I then ask them who's a democracy, who throws gays off of rooftops, they have no idea of any of the real facts or information. I think that Israel lost a lot of the PR war related to Gaza. I think that a lot of the movement that supports Hamas and so forth is not supported. I think if you ask people, is Israel you're going to get like 80% agreement that Israel is a nation state, that is the state of the Jewish people. And so a lot of what's happened here, it is Madamani-like in the sense that a lot of people get behind slogans they don't understand, right? Even though they don't really support, they don't support globalizing the intifada. They don't support that, and they don't realize what they're talking about. What they tend to support is some kind of peace between Palestinians and Israel. And I do think that once the Gaza war is over, Israel will be able to rebuild its image, because it is an incredible culture and society, with the greatest generation that, frankly, on a day's notice went to war, right, throughout the entire region to defend itself against what were fundamentally existential threats orchestrated by Iran. And so I think that rebuilding is more than possible. And a lot of it will depend upon how successful President Trump is. I mean, look, Netanyahu was in Washington for 2 or 3 days. No, nobody's ever here for 2 or 3 days. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm sure is going on that we don't know about, and it will be interesting to see how it unfolds. If Syria, comes into the Abraham Accords, for example, if we begin to see real movements in the region, I think that the region will solve the problem ahead of college students, and then college students will have to get on board.
Just sounds like modern day political campaigns are really just down to mass education campaigns for a constituency that doesn't know much about the issues. Sad to say, but it feels like every answer is nobody really knows what they're voting for or about.
Well, it's interesting because with Steve Ballmer, he has something called USA Facts, and he's been doing just the facts. And I urged him to do that, right? And if you play his videos on kind of what the budget really is and kind of how the healthcare system works, and no, voters really, if I do any kind of knowledge test, how big is the budget? How big is our economy? What's the unemployment rate? What's the inflation? If I do any kind of test, Americans will flunk it, right? And the interesting thing is, the higher your education, right, you flunk it just as much, right? And so what we thought would be what would really solve things, it turns out, and I always used to say, and I had a chapter in one of my books called The Impressionable Elites, that the more people get removed from the everyday problems, the more they then are persuadable through mass media of what they see. And so that's why the actual working class voted for Andrew Cuomo, and the college-educated upper class, voted for the so-called socialist who's supposed to save the working class.
The barista proletariat. Let me ask you, as we kind of look ahead to 2026, how are you seeing Trump's numbers? Where do you think he is at this point in his presidency, either on certain key issues or just kind of overall?
Well, I think in terms of accomplishments, he's had a spectacular period. In terms of his numbers, I think his numbers are good, but the next level up will really depend upon how his economic policies work out. I think that huge numbers support what's going on with closing the border. I think people see him now, in our polls as, quote, restoring American values. I think they're concerned about kind of excess power. It's like, and that's where I think the Democrats are kind of focusing their messaging. But actually, at the end of the day, if a year from now, people's view of the economy is what it was when it was during his first term, then I think you're going to see some really significant increase in his numbers. And if they think the economy is bad and inflation is back and the tariffs didn't work, well, I think that's where you're just going to have to wait and see how this unfolds.
Can we end on something light and happy? Can you tell our listeners about Sport Beach? Complete non sequitur, but go ahead. You were just in Cannes?
So Stagwell Inc. is a broad-based communications, advertising, marketing company, and kind of part of what we do is bring athletes together with sponsors and clients. And every year now we hold what's called Sport Beach, and Sport Beach has become a phenomenon because of the tremendous interest in sports and in the brands kind of marketing through sports. And we had A-Rod, we had Serena Williams, we had Sue Bird, we had Anthony Camillo. So we had an incredible group of athletes, and we had about 6,000 or 7,000 people, come through the experience. So I think what I always say is that the world is divided up into news junkies, sports junkies, entertainment junkies. And if you're none of those, then you're a couch potato. So personally, I'm a little bit more of a news junkie. I know a lot of sports junkies. Maybe I was one more growing up. But I think you discover in the Sun itself, you go right to the core of the growing network of news junkies that we really encourage advertisers to love sports and entertainment, but not ignore news, because people are consuming more of it than ever before.
Great. Mark Penn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.